Hey, podcast fam, welcome back. Really happy to host you again today. Today's episode of Stephen's show, we're very lucky to host the incredible Jennifer K. Hill. She's got an inspiring track record as an entrepreneur. She's launched and exited her first business. She's currently building a brand new startup. She's taken a journey from being really good within her professional career of recruiting, setting up her own agency, then having a significant failure along the way, and then rebuilding herself to build her own platform for recruiting. So she's found a huge amount of success. And now with her new startup, she's really focused on matching individuals with the right therapist or a professional in their lives to make sure that there's a great connection between whoever we decide to work with for whatever the therapies that we might need in life. More than that, she's got an amazing network of inspirational people that she's connected with. She's an incredible speaker. She articulates her thoughts very well. She speaks very openly. So if you're looking for someone to inspire you into how to communicate better or how to take really difficult steps in your life, Jennifer's content will really be for you today. If you're liking the content so far and you would like to hear more about it, please go ahead and click the follow or subscribe buttons. Make sure that you're always connected to the content that we're pushing out. We're pushing out great content. We have a lot of guests coming up. And so it really is exciting to get you to follow me. I get very happy about it. And more than that, it gives a lot of value to the guests who are coming on. So it opens up to a bigger network of potential guests. So please go ahead, like, follow, and subscribe. Make sure that you're the first to know. Jennifer, I'm so happy to have you here today. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Stephen. The pleasure is all mine.
It's been really good to sort of connect with you physically. We've been in the same orbits. We've been circling around each other. We're on this amazing Lisbon Founders Club, a great collection of entrepreneurs and people doing amazing things. So when I saw your history, you're in another startup doing Optimatch, doing some great things there. You've got this amazing history in terms of a public speaker for 15 years. Can you just talk to me a little bit about the journey? How do you go what's the journey of your life been that's now brought you to a point of another startup, doing something crazy, raising some money? What's the journey been?
I swore I would never do it again, Stephen. It was so funny. I swear the day I sold my last company, I said, never will I ever build another company again. And then you spend a year searching for croissants in Paris and going on long walks, and you realize there's more to that in life and that it's time to build a new company. So when I was very young, I had an accident happen that set me on my career trajectory. And I share this often when I'm speaking at colleges and to students in different ages of school. Sometimes we make plans, Stephen, and we think we know how it's going to turn out, and things pivot. And how can we embrace the pivot? So that's what happened to me when I was 20 years old. I had graduated college early, left high school at 16, went straight to college. And I was planning to go to law school. I had these great aspirations. I loved logic. I knew I was going to do that. So I graduated in June of that year, and fast forward, I'm now living with my boyfriend in Los Angeles, and I got a call like something out of a movie or a bad dream. Oops, you didn't graduate. You're missing a class from high school, U.S. History 101. I was like, wait a second, hold up. I took AP, like advanced placement classes, and passed them all on European history and otherwise. They said, no, you have two options. One, you can come back to school for a semester and take this class. Or two, you can take a 2-hour oral exam on a 1,000-page book on U.S. history, pass or fail, with the Dean of Social Sciences. So I opted for option number 2, and thankfully I was able to regurgitate everything I needed to know. But that then pivoted my plans because I couldn't apply for law school that year because of when they now showed I was getting my diploma. So I received 3 job offers in the interim, trying to figure out what I was going to do in this gap year. And that led me to the passion that helped me to build my first company, which was a recruitment job. I didn't even know what a recruiter was. When somebody interviewed me about it, I was like, what does a recruiter even do? And quickly I discerned I've always had this deep yearning to understand human beings. And what better line of work to do that in than recruiting? So I wound up working for this first company. I called the CEO and I said, hi, my name is Jennifer Cahill. You're going to hire me and I will be the best damn thing that's ever happened to you. And I went on to break every company record they had and then pivoted and opened my first company. Now, a lot of people don't know this, Stephen. My first company was an abysmal failure. So here I am, I'm 27, I think 28 years old. And I think to myself, oh, before I decide to open another recruiting company, I thought I'll open a consulting company and people will hire me and I'll be paid millions of dollars on stages. So I left my 6-figure a year job, went out to do that, and went from making $200,000 to $5,000 the next year. And it was the best thing because I failed. And in that year, I was begged to come back to the recruiting industry. And my ex-husband, God bless him, said, honey, why don't you just open up your own recruiting firm? And voila, next thing you knew, I was running a company. I didn't know how to manage 2 sticks. And all of my old colleagues begged to come and work with me. They said, please, 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 we want to work with you. And I had to learn as I was building. And within 8 years, we built and sold that company. Took some time off, like I said, went croissant hunting in Paris, and now building the new company OptiMatch. And in my spare time, I do a podcast, as you know, and do a lot of consulting and speaking and facilitating just for the joy of it around the world.
I want to just jump back onto the failure point in terms of the business. I think that's always very interesting, and I've had a few that have taught me quite a lot, and I maybe didn't realize the lessons while they were happening, but when I look back, I realized what I was actually learning. What was the main reason you think it failed, and what was the sort of the transition to and the mindset transition that you used to then start something on your own? Like, how did you build motivation from the failure? So what was the failure, and then how did you remotivate?
Great question. What happened, Stephen, was the failure is I had my head so far up my butt that I couldn't see straight. I was young. I was full of grit and grind and just thought if I built it, they would come. I had no plan. I had zero business plan, zero to little understanding of how that line of work worked. And although I had already had quite a bit of success in recruitment, it was a completely divergent path. So the bridge for me in between both of those was another recruiting company that had known of me. I had quite a good reputation in the industry, begged me to come work with them. And they said, please, 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 will you come work with us as a partner? And I didn't know. I was really torn if I should go back to it. And I did. I went to work with them and I realized that values are such an important part of a company, and their values and my values were misaligned. And it was around that time that my ex-husband said, well, honey, why don't you just do this on your own? In 3 months of working with this partnership, you've had more clients than you had in the 7 years prior working for this other company. Why don't you just go ahead and open your own thing? And it was daunting. I had an undergrad in psychology. I had never taken a business class, didn't know bookkeeping, anything. And yet that's why you hire brilliant people. It's you learn the things you're good at, and then you learn the things that you might not be as strong at, and you hire those out. And in fact, there are 2 points I'll give you around this, Stephen. One is a friend of mine in Los Angeles named Curtis Estes. I remember interviewing him years ago for that other podcast called Get Yourself the Job. And what I loved, Curtis is this brilliant wealth manager. He wrote a book called Your Life by Design. And much like you have Maslow's hierarchy of needs or the pyramid, he had this pyramid where at the bottom rung of the pyramid is the stuff you don't want to do, the stuff that maybe it's just not your jam. It could be talking to customers, it could be designing, whatever it is, you write that down. Then above that, you're like, oh, I really don't love this stuff, but I could do it if I had to. So that's the next rung. Above that, you're like, wow, I really kind of enjoy this. I might not be great at, but I'm really enjoying the bits I'm learning. And then the top of the pyramid is the, yes, I love this. I could do this all day, every day. And the idea in Curtis's book is that you actually farm out the things that you're not good at. So as we built our team, that's what I quickly learned. And it was funny because this was reiterated to me 3 times. I always believe if you hear something 3 times within a short period, it's something you're meant to listen to. So fast forward 10 years after I'd read Curtis's book, I was doing a speaking engagement in London with a friend of mine, Deepak Chopra. And Deepak, during his keynote, said the same thing. He said, do not spend your life focusing on your weaknesses. Spend your life focusing on the things that are your strengths, because we could spend our whole lives and cause ourselves great pain and turmoil, especially as business leaders. There might be a short window of 3 months, 6 months, or a year as we're building something until we can scale and hire the people we need, though to the best of our ability, focus on our strengths and pivot from our weaknesses.
That's a very good point. Actually, and we see this in nature too, is when a tree has damage in a specific branch or a weakness within the trunk, it actually shifts all of its energy to the strength. And that's how it promotes its growth, right? So instead of trying to repair or fix something that's detracting from its energy, it pushes all its energy into the things that will actually make it grow. So it makes sense for us to do that. And often, I think with startups, we get into a habit of saying, I need to do everything. I need to be, a master of everything. And we actually can pull our own growth back or overload ourselves. We find ourselves we're completely insecure or anxious because we're trying to force ourselves to do something that we're not really that good at, or it doesn't really motivate us every single day. I've definitely seen that in this space. And the other challenge with startups is they ask you to be generalists. They say, like, that's kind of in the first stages, the culture's great. Everyone can kind of do everything. We throw a lot of ideas at the wall. But as they mature, they really do need specialists to come and say, I'm really good at the finance piece of this business. I'm really good at X or Y. And you bring those people in and you suddenly find that you have time to really think about the things that you're good at and be a thinker, a talker, or a mover the way that you want to do it. What's been one of the lower points for you in your journey? Or like, what's been one of the biggest challenges that you've experienced?
I remember very clearly thinking how much better I could do it than the first company, really the only company I've worked for, right? You think to yourself, you're like, they're making millions of dollars a year on me. I can do it so much better. And yet, when you pull the curtain back and you see the wizard behind the curtain, right? You actually don't know what goes into running a business. It looks so easy. Like if a business owner does a great job as an employee, you don't know how hard it is. And there was a moment that I remember, Stephen, where I was within pennies of being able to make payroll, pennies. And if you've been an entrepreneur at any point, at some point or another, we've all been there. And the question is, how scrappy can you get and how resilient can you be in that moment? I remember there were 2 times. One of the first times was in the recruiting field I was in. I didn't realize that around December to January, they just wouldn't pay their bills for 2 months. It wasn't that we didn't have cash flow. It's just that because of quarterly flow and so forth, they wouldn't pay. And so on this particular time, there were 2 occasions where I think I got 10 0% interest limit credit cards. So that way, anything that wasn't payroll, I could just carry over on these 0% interest credit cards until I could, have the cash flow coming in again and save and protect that cash. So that's one of the hardest things as an entrepreneur is even if you're generating hundreds of thousands of dollars a month, but if you have 200,000 a month in payroll, those are the hardest things that sometimes you feel resentful towards your employees. And yet you get to carry the weight. When things are down, you don't get to blame your employees. You get to look at how am I contributing to their success or failure? May I share with you a story about that?
Yeah, I'd love to hear.
I'm very deeply grateful. My current co-founder of my company, Julian Adler, came in about 9, 10 years ago as my business coach. Highly recommend if you're listening out there and you don't have a coach, mentor of some type, get one. They can
I
help.
definitely agree with that.
Yeah, they can help you see the blind spots, the things that you just don't know. So Julian did 2 very profound things, many, but I'll highlight these 2 for you. One, I had an employee who I was frustrated with. She had been one of the earliest employees I had hired. And, people make mistakes. And as an employer, though, sometimes you start tracking the mistakes and you say, oh, well, tough luck. I'm going to have to terminate this person. So in this particular case, she was on a PIP, a performance improvement plan, and we were getting ready to terminate her. And he came in and he said to me, I'll always remember this, Stephen. He said, Jennifer, what if the reason she is being a disappointment is because you are looking for her to be a disappointment? And I was like, excuse me? The nerve of you. I have a list a mile long of clients she didn't call back, mistakes she has made. So I had evidence, right, to prove that I was right and she was wrong. And he said, okay, great. How's that working out for you? You're going to have to terminate her. You're going to have to rehire her. He's like, do you want to play a game with me? I said, fine, begrudgingly, fine, I'll play a game with you. And here was the game. He said, I want you for 1 week to look for the good in her. 1 week. Everything, whatever she does, write down at least one good thing she's doing a day. I want you to write it down so it's in your consciousness and you're paying attention to it. At the end of a week, we'll talk. We'll see how it's going. Fine. I'll go do that. So the first day, I write it down very begrudgingly, like I nitpick some little things she does well. Second day, I pick something else, like, okay, she did that okay. At the end of a week, Stephen, she was doing better than she had since the day I had hired her. Now, not only did that expand, she went on to be our executive vice president of the company and to run the company after I sold it. And the company's even more profitable than when I sold it because of her. Now, the second part that he did that changed my life is something called human design. Are you aware of this?
I'm not aware. Tell us.
Human design is profound. So when I started working with Julian on this, what he did is he would do my human design and then everybody who worked with me. And it turns out, who would have thought, we are all designed differently as human beings. So when he did this particular employee's human design, it turned out there are 5 main human designs. You can look them up. There are free profiles you can get online, but the 5 main ones are reflector, projector, generator, manifestor, and manifesting generator. Projectors, which is what I am, and it turns out what she was, are leaders, and we are meant to manage flow of other people's energy. We are wonderful. If you give us a team of people, we thrive, we flourish. However, if you expect a projector to act like a generator or a manifesting generator, those are the people like Deepak, for example, is a generator. He's written 95 books or something like that. They can produce different designs. We found out she was a projector, so we had her in the wrong role at the company. I was treating her like a worker bee, when in reality, she was supposed to be more of a queen bee, guiding the ebb and flow of people's energies. When we moved her into that queen bee, into that managerial role as the buffer between me and the team, she flourished. She was amazing, and it saved me a lot of pain and suffering, and that's how she went on to go ahead and take over the company.
So how do you apply life design to your business? How do you sort of start to evaluate for that to make sure that you have the right people in the right roles? I think that must be a critical thing and a critical fail point. Like you could have, when you interview someone, you're like, this person is perfect. You culturally align to them. They say all the right things. You see the experience, but in the role, it just fails to materialize. What's the assessment that you can do to say, oh, we've actually misplaced you?
There are many different things. I remember one of the first business books I ever read was called From Good to Great, about getting the right people
Jim
on the
Collins, right?
bus. Yeah, of
Yeah.
course. So there is that book that talks about many different modalities and things. If you have somebody in your life who knows human design, there's a free website called Jovian Archive, Jovian Archive, where you can pull up your or anybody else's human design for free. And you put it in, and it's basically an amalgamation of astrology, Chinese medicine, Ayurveda, all sorts of things. And I have never in my life found something to be so on point. So what I do personally, every time I hire somebody, I ask permission of them. I never say it's required. I say, would you mind? There's this technique I like to use to help me to better understand how to work with you. So step 1 is I'll understand how they're designed. Are they meant to be a manager? Are they meant to be more BD? Are they meant to be working? Some people get inside their heads. This system tells you so much about how we're designed. I remember I had this wonderful ops team member who was brilliant. Her whole design was in her head. So that's what made her so organized and so ops oriented. And yet, when she was not in flow, she would get activated or agitated. So the best thing for her was to go for a walk. Well, if I didn't know that, I wouldn't be able to communicate that with her. And so part 1 is that. Part 2 that I think is a huge missing for most entrepreneurs. As we were talking before the show, I was privileged to get to do this other show called Get Yourself the Job. And one of my favorite guys I interviewed at least 2 or 3 times is called Dr. Paul White. And Dr. White co-wrote a book with Dr. Gary Chapman of the 5 Love Languages called Appreciation at Work. And what he found blew my mind. He found out that 87, I believe it was, percent of job seekers leave a job due to lack of appreciation. So let's imagine you've done human design, you've worked with a consultant, whatever it looks like, whatever your system is, you've read Good to Great, you now have people in the right roles. But how do you keep them? This is where Dr. Paul White's work comes in. The other thing I would do, in addition to doing somebody's human design the moment I hired somebody, I would ask them, Stephen, how do you prefer to be appreciated? Now, you would never imagine this, but if you think about it, 87% of people leave jobs due to lack of appreciation. Most of us give appreciation like we think we want to receive it. And yet there's this gap and a disconnect. So I remember very clearly a gentleman who I was working with in the Bay Area, one of our team members. And when I asked him that, he said, Jennifer, please don't ever acknowledge me publicly. I would be mortified. He said, if you sent out a team email or acknowledged me on a team call, that would be awful for me. He said, I might even contemplate quitting because I get really embarrassed about that. He said, but if you could just privately send me a note or an email or a voice memo, that would mean a lot to me. Now imagine how many of us have had a gentleman like this gentleman where we think, oh, I'm going to be his cheerleader and send a mass email, all caps out, great job, Bob, or whoever it is. And yet you just caused Bob pain. So I think the new evolution of entrepreneurs and of workers is demanding a certain level of conscientiousness and bringing our awareness not only to how we lead, but also to others and what they need. And I think that's what makes a great leader.
I think appreciation is a difficult one in that a lot of people also don't know how they want to be appreciated. So I've definitely asked that question, and or I've been sort of told that I don't feel appreciated. And then the follow-up question, well, how do you want to be appreciated? And there isn't clarity in terms of that either from the person wanting to be appreciated. So that question must also drive some awareness in them, like, oh, wait a minute, that is quite an important thing that I haven't really thought about. It used to be just about the salary and do we get the bonuses and are there nice perks and do I work in a nice place and are my colleagues nice? But actually, what validates me? How do I feel appreciated? And that's a question that I think most people have to ask themselves.
So here's a funny thing. You ready for this? It actually ties directly back into human design. There are two types of human design, generators and manifesting generators, that prefer yes or no questions. So if you were to ask a generator or a manifesting generator, how do you prefer to be appreciated? You're going to shut them down. They have no answer for you. If I say you're a generator, Steve, and I said, Steve, would you like to be appreciated by words of affirmation? Yes or no? That is going to land for you. So I'm constantly teaching people this, not just in business, but also in relationships. How many of us fight with our spouse, our kids, whatever? And yet, if you don't know how somebody is designed, you can't even ask that simple question of how do you want to be appreciated in a way that lands for them. And that goes back to the conscientiousness I was talking about.
Yeah, and understanding communication method, right? Like, what languages are we speaking here, so that I know that I'm asking you a yes or no question. Do you want to be appreciated? Yes. Is money the good version for you? No. Like that, understand that communication must be critical. Just going back, so what is a manifesting generator and what is a generator?
So I'm not by any means a human design expert. I'm just like dangerous enough because I dabble in it for the joy of it.
Yeah.
So when I started learning about, let me differentiate. There are 5 main types.
Mm-hmm.
Reflectors are the most rare. I've only met 3 or 4 in my life. They have nothing defined in their system. They are brilliant healers, can be very creative. They just are a flow of information. So it's rare that you'll find a reflector on a business team because they often don't go into traditional business. I just met an attorney reflector the other day, and he's like, wow, that makes a lot of sense of why he gets exhausted and different things happen. So reflectors are very unique, only 1% of the population. Projectors, which is what I am, are leaders. We are meant to lead. Now, here's the other important thing about projectors. We must be invited. Just like you invited me today to be here, it's an energetic drain for us if we don't get invited. So the more you invite projectors, the more happy and healthy they'll be. Now, I'll give you a funny example with my friend's daughter. I was doing this for my friend M. She has 4 kids. She's a generator, which we'll get to in a moment. And 2 of her kids were projectors. And she's like, wait a second. Are you telling me that's why Everly, who's a projector, doesn't say, Mama, I want a strawberry? 7 years old little kid. She'll say, Mama, that strawberry looks good. And she's like, child, ask for a strawberry. You want a strawberry? Say, I want a strawberry. That's not how Everly is designed. What Everly needs is to be invited to have the damn strawberry. Can you imagine that?
Yeah.
But imagine you have Everlys on your team. So that's projectors. We need to be invited, to be recognized, to lead teams. Generators are producers. They have these energy systems. Generators and manifesting generators both have energy centers defined. They can operate on 4 hours of sleep a night. They can produce 100 books. They can rule the world because it's not to say anybody couldn't rule the world, but they just have a lot more natural energy than the rest of us. Manifestors are connected to their throat center. So they're like a generator, but they also have a lot of power in the way that they speak. I've had many successful manifesting generators in sales roles and things like that. And then manifestors are these magical unicorn creatures who can create when they're in alignment. They can create just about anything. They're phenomenal in sales. They can create anything they want. I had a friend of mine who's a manifestor who created $4 million in a weekend. Like, they can create whatever they want. But with their voice, they can create or destroy, as with all of us. But their ability to do so is amplified. And with each one of these, there's a not self theme. So if I'm remembering correctly, projectors become bitter when they're out of alignment. Manifestors become angry when they're out of alignment. Generators and manifesting generators become frustrated. And I'm drawing a blank on what reflectors are because there's so few of them that I've encountered. But when you know this, it just helps give you these guideposts. If you're in a relationship or working with one and you see they're becoming bitter, then you might want to ask yourself, how can I acknowledge that person? How can I be sure this person's in the right role?
That's very interesting. I think one of my key traits is that when I feel very anxious or overwhelmed, I go into mass procrastination mode. So I tend to be, I really put things off. It's frustrating for me because I know actually when I sit down, the task that I want to do is maybe a 10-minute task, but I can make that a 4 or 5 hour task just because it's something that really is draining to me, or I'm very anxious about the outcome. And so I really tend to drag my feet in terms of getting to it. But it's one of these habits that I constantly have to work on. Like, it's going to take you much quicker than you think. And you're actually not really reading the question that's being asked of you. You've kind of just, I read who it's from. I know it's going to be something, and then I will answer that mail actually in 2 days. But I could have answered it in 2 minutes. It's weird, that behavior that I've generated.
May I offer something one of my mentors shared?
Yeah, take it.
So I love setting intentions. That is one of my go-to things every day, every week, every month, and every year. I set intentions. Every Sunday, I once read a great article from a CEO who helped other CEOs get organized. He said, every Sunday, spend an hour of your time setting up your week. Go through your meetings, get clarity on what you want to accomplish, what you don't want to accomplish. And then you set down 3 overarching intentions for the coming week. Like, what are the 3 must-dos this week? But then within each one of those, there might be micro tasks. And what you do is every day, what my mentor taught me is you have 3 must-dos that day. Those are non-negotiables. Before you answer an email, before you do anything else, before you get on a phone call, those 3 things must be accomplished. So that way you're taking those measurable steps towards your greater success every day. And I took it a step further. I have a lot of entrepreneurial friends, and I was really inspired. There are lots of studies about the power of groups and accountability. And so what I did is about 6 months ago, I have a friend of mine who doesn't work in my industry. She's a children's book writer, where every week, Monday through Friday, we have a 15-minute call every day at the top of a certain hour. And we hold each other to account for those 3 things. And if one of us starts BSing the other one, like if one of us is like, yeah, I'm going to do this, but you can feel the person's not really committed to it, then we talk about what's missing or what resistance there is. And I call it having an accountability buddy. And having that accountability buddy, you could even do it for 5 minutes at the top of every day. No matter who you are, whether you're part of a 5,000 person company, a 5-person, or a 1-person company, finding somebody, even if it's outside your company, to help hold you accountable. I can't tell you how many days where my mind is just like, whoosh, I have so much to do. And I'll go back and I'll check my text to my friend. We then text each other what we're committed to for the following day. And then that is my roadmap to be sure that I don't easily get distracted or procrastinate.
Yeah, I've developed something similar. It wasn't specifically work, but it's goal focused for me. And working with my brother and my cousin, they're my accountability buddies. That it would be a morning check-in. This is where I am in whatever I am doing, and I would do it on a 60-day hard drive. So for 60 days, I'm going to check in with you every single day, and I'm going to tell you how I'm progressing on just this one or these 2 things. And I find it gives a lot of clarity or structure to what you're trying to do. And even when I do those things, the rest also falls into place more effectively. So even if I have a very busy day, I find that the day closes out. I feel more wholesome. I feel more centered. So it's been, yeah, I think it's a very, very good advice to do that. And I haven't really applied it to a business setting, but I think it's something to just carry over. I don't understand why I shouldn't have done it. It makes complete
I would
sense.
have never thought of it either until my mentor, Melissa, she also told me something beautiful too. She's like, stop doing the things you hate. I had this brilliant idea, Stephen. Years ago, I'd interviewed this guy, Peng Joon or something like that, who was one of the most famous social media influencers. And he says, for 1 year, if you want to like get a big following and do this, post one video a day for a year. I'm like, I got this. I'm going to do it. Well, what I forgot, Stephen, I hate posting videos. I don't like being on social media. It's
Yeah.
a little secret. Please forgive me for it. But true story. So I'm on the phone with Melissa and I was doing 365 days of tips for living your best life. And I'm at day 186 and I have just about had it. Now it's helping people, but I'm not getting joy out of it. And Melissa's like, why are you doing it then? I'm like, why am I doing it? I'm spending probably half hour, 40 minutes out of every day. And I'm actually going to piggyback onto this, something else I learned from my vocal coach and dear friend, Arthur Samuel Joseph, something called the 168-hour exercise. Have you heard of this?
No, this is a wealth of information. I'm very happy to receive. Go ahead.
Okay, good. So what Arthur taught me is Arthur's the one who's trained Tony Robbins, Pierce Brosnan, I mean, all these brilliant thought leaders and actors and famous people. And what he said is that we only all have 168 hours in a week. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're the president of a country, if you're a stay-at-home mom, you have 168 hours in a week. How are you spending that? We audit how we spend our money, we audit how we spend everything, but we don't often audit how are we spending our time. So you do a time audit. I'm actually doing this for one of my coaching clients right now where we're going through a time audit with him and one of the other executives in the company. And so you do this time audit and then one of three things might happen. One, you might notice that your time is filled up and you're like contented. You're like, wow, I really spent that time well. I feel good. That's how I am now. Having done this a few times myself, I now feel good. At the end of every day, I have used up every moment in exactly the way I want. So that's maybe where we want to get to. No good or bad or right or wrong. Number two, you might notice that you have an abundance of extra time. When I first did this exercise 10 years ago, I noticed I had 8 hours that were unaccounted for, that were unspent. And then that got me asking, what could I do with that time? What would I want to do with that time? Do I want to do more business? Is there something pleasurable I want to do? Running, spending time at the beach? Or three, you might realize that you have no time and that you're not satisfied with the way your time is being spent, in which case you get to do an audit and figure out, what am I committed to? How would I choose to spend this time?
So what's the easiest way to start that 168-hour audit? Is it to design your perfect day, write out what your perfect day is, and see how you align to that? What's the best way to approach that?
So the best way to do it is to start with, like, I have an Excel spreadsheet I give to my clients that they use to do a time audit. So the first way you do it is you audit your time without setting any expectations, just to take a snapshot in time of what does Stephen's work life look like? What is and you even account for how much time you sleep. It's not just work. You're accounting for the wholeness of your entire week. So step one is to take a snapshot of it. Then step two is to look at the audit and go, oh, okay, well, this is what I'm committed to, or this is not what I'm committed to, and here's where I want to adjust it. And then you begin to insert, here's what I would love to do with these extra hours, or here's where I would love to remove, 10 hours of TV time. There's a great book I'm reading right now called 10 Times is Better Than 2 Times, I believe.
Okay.
I don't know if you read that one. It's a
I
great
haven't.
business book. And in that book, the man talks about how he's a famous executive coach. He noticed with his wife that he was spending 10 plus hours a week watching TV. And he said, I feel anxious, particularly watching the news, and it's not serving me. He cut that time out. And he noticed he had a whole different shift in how he was being with his wife, with his clients, with his kids. And so the point is you get to see, how do I even feel about this? The hour a day I'm spending on social media, or the whatever it might be that you're investing time in. What's the ROI on that?
Yeah, I think that's a big one, is evaluating where we are spending our time, and making sure that we're allocating enough time in our day for our personal growth. I think that that's something that we don't invest in enough. There is actually a lot of Netflix hours that you could read a book, or you could go do something incredibly rewarding, or you could take a walk. And I think that the illusion of fatigue kind of like carries on perpetuating itself because you keep putting yourself in situations that are not good for you, right? Like you think, oh, I'm tired from work today, so I really need to sit down and just watch this TV and just zone out. But actually, you'd find something more rewarding if you went for that walk for maybe 15 or 20 minutes and caught some sunset rays and started your bedtime process, right? Like I think that that's a big thing, that we're not really living our lives as aware or as accountable as we should, and we'll actually find more energy and we'll be less tired at the end of the day if we just paid attention to those things.
I would agree. And may I audit what you just said?
Yes.
Remove should. It's one of the biggest things I work with my clients on, coaching clients, people I work with
Because
is
it generates guilt.
yes. So we should, quote unquote, all over ourselves all day. I should do this. I shouldn't do that. If somebody ever says, if your wife or somebody says you should do this, you're probably not going to be like, why, yes, honey, that's a great idea. No, people are resistant to that. So we have this energetic resistance. When you say, I could, or I have the opportunity to, our words are the paintbrushes that create our reality. And so the more we become consciously aware, as Arthur would say, of the words that we say, then we begin, that's a whole other conversation, as
Yeah.
I teach clients how to audit their words. I remember vividly about a decade ago, the company was thriving, things were going really well. And this one client calls me, it's like 11 a.m. on a Wednesday, and she says, Jennifer, I don't want to take up too much of your time. I know how busy you are. And in that moment, Stephen, it hit me. I was not committed to being busy. Who wants to be busy? Busy is just doing the same thing repetitively over and over, and there's no joy, there's no fulfillment, no joie de vivre in that. And yet, when I shifted that to, in that moment, I really got present. I said, oh, wow, do you have it that I'm really busy? And she said, well, yeah, everybody knows how busy you are. It's like, that's not what I'm committed to. So from that moment forward, I shifted ever saying busy again to I have more miracles than I know what to do with, because there's a whole brain science aspect that we could get into around this, of how many bits of information per second our brain is paying attention to. And yet, like I don't know if you know this, Stephen, at every moment, we have billions, with a B, bits of information per second bombarding us. Yet our conscious mind is only processing about 50 to 120 bits. So if I'm looking for busy in my life, busy is naturally going to show up and fill up my calendar. If I'm looking for miracles, miracles will show up. And that's like a whole other thing. Miracles in business, miracles in personal life.
So just on that conscious processing, is the consciousness processing 120, or is it filtering out the rest?
So at a subconscious standpoint, we have billions of bits every second. Right now, you just had several billion bits of information bombarding you. Your conscious mind is self-selecting through what we call perspective, those 50 to 120 bits of information. The analogy I like to use to help people understand it, it's like, imagine you have an infinite warehouse or stadium that is pitch black. You can't see a damn thing. And the only thing you have to guide you, Stephen, is this tiny little miner's helmet with like an itty bitty little light. So all that you're going to see is whatever direction you point. If you point your head to the left, you're going to see what's to the left. If you point your head to the right, you're going to see what's to the right. So we're only going to see what we're looking for. And there was actually a funny game. I just interviewed this guy for my show, Dr. Dane here. He and his co-founder, Gary Douglas of Access Consciousness. They're in 170 countries, I think, around the world. Years ago, I was interviewing Gary. He taught me the how does life get any better than this game? Now, funny story. So going back to that same neuroscience, if we say out loud every time something a little bit good happens, how does life get any better than this? We're redirecting that little miner's helmet, those 50 to 120 bits of information, towards the next best thing. So Gary gave me this profound story on the show back then. This was July of 2017. I will tell you a secret, Stephen. I played that game. I got so lit up. I was like, this makes sense. Like, it made logical sense, scientific sense. So I started teaching everybody. I had a friend of mine who created memes for us that were saved on our phone that said, how does it get better than this? And I played that game for a whole month, every day. End of 1 month, I get a message. We'd like to buy your company, out of the blue. How does it get better than this?
That's an amazing sort of recalibration of mindset, to be in a constant positive search rather than a constant negative search, because the converse is true, right? If you
Totally.
how can life get any better than this in a negative context is like it's always bad, right? Like, so it's going to carry on looking for the bad things, and you find like you get on this repetitive wheel of bad things constantly happening, is because that's actually where your mindless helmet is looking,
Yeah.
right? So if we can just talk about Optimatch a little bit, everything that we've kind of been talking about in terms of life design, sort of cultural alignment, people alignment, it sounds like Optimatch is starting to play in that space. If you could just talk a bit about Optimatch and how it works.
Absolutely. So after building and selling the recruiting company, I took some time off, and my life, Stephen, has been one big foray and study into human consciousness and understanding what motivates us as human beings. So we really bootstrapped the algorithm from the tens of thousands of job seekers and clients I worked with in recruiting over 20 years. And I began to ascertain what motivates one person over another. That was something that had us be really successful and able to get acquired in the last company, is that we made these wonderful matches. We had higher retention rates, higher success of people accepting job offers. So essentially, we spent 8 months synthesizing that into a mathematical formula and algorithm to analyze what motivates Stephen as a human being, what motivates Jennifer as a human being. If we were going to work together, where might there be friction? If we were going to work together and I was your coach, is there alignment there? Is there not alignment? It doesn't necessarily mean that you throw the baby out with the bathwater if for some reason there's not. It just means that you have an opportunity to be more thoughtful. If I know that you're motivated by something that doesn't motivate me, the question is, how do I speak into your listening so that way we can be aligned and that way you feel safe? What we found more than anything in the year of beta testing we did with Optimatch, as we got to its 87%, I believe it was, satisfaction rate, is we found that if our motivating factors align, it allows you and I to feel safer. It allows you and I to feel more able to be authentic and to share. And that's where transformation happens. Whether I'm your coach, I'm your therapist, whether I'm your teacher, your mentor, there has to be some level of alignment around that.
Yeah, I think that's a big one, right? Like being able to communicate well with anybody is a critical thing, but also that understanding of how to filter information that makes sense to you, right? Like how to separate bad bedside manner from what's being, like how someone might care for you. They care for you through knowledge or knowing, right? But they might not be soft in their approach to the information that you need. So that must be a really critical thing. But it's amazing that you've been able to build a formula, a mathematical formula around this that you can now apply to tech. It's really remarkable.
Yeah, it's been so much fun to get to see the data, and we're only at stage one. We haven't even done release candidate one. We're still in beta of this, but we're working with our first few clients around it, and it's an incredible experience because, as you and I were talking before we started, matching across all fields is broken.
Mm.
And so our dream is to figure out what is the special sauce that has people match? How can we help people? There are so many applications. Mental health is the first one we're focused on because it's very dear to my heart. I struggled with bulimia and anxiety and depression when I was younger, and we all have a family member or friend or somebody we love who has been impacted by mental health. And so many people spend their whole lives trying to find the right coach, the right therapist, to no avail, and then giving up on their well-being.
Yeah, that's actually a common feedback point that I get around specifically therapists, is that um, they don't feel a lot of value in the hour that you share with that person. Or I've definitely felt that with a lot of therapists, that I'm doing more of the work, which I get, but I don't feel a lot of the feedback, And so I'm also looking for guidance in that therapy. I'm also looking for some sort of direction in what I'm trying to get to. But I found with coaches, I get that. Like I was like, we can talk about stuff, and I feel like I'm not having to provide too much context to able to get to the point that I need to get to. So I think that it is quite a challenging one, especially with mental health. There's a lot of people walking around with a lot of stuff, and I know how quickly that can develop. I've personally had this, had sort of really bad anxiety. How I operate is I like chaos because it quells the noise of anxiety for me. So the more I can create chaos around me, the more it sort of keeps the anxiety sort of at bay. But sometimes that chaos that I can create overloads the anxiety. And then I've had like sort of pretty big fall downs from that, where I've had to rebuild. So it, mental health is a big one. And I think that if you're not aware of it, or you just think that this is how you're supposed to normally feel, you can sort of groove this pattern into your thinking that makes it a permanent state.
Yeah, and the biggest thing I think out of everything we've talked about today, Stephen, is compassion. I think that the more that we can learn to be compassionate with ourselves, then by extension of us understanding how to give ourselves that same level of grace and compassion, thereby allows us to extend that compassion to others. I'll leave you with something kind of funny around this, Stephen. Years ago, I was a recovering jerk. I was the jerk. Like Devil Wears Prada didn't even hold a candle to me because I didn't know how to manage two people. And I was stuck in my own drama, my own chaos. And I was the jerk who used to send the all caps emails like, "Are you all crazy? What are you doing? Get it done faster, better, smarter." And it's only been through decades now of self reflection, of understanding they were doing the best they could. I was doing the best I could in that moment. And the more that I could extend self compassion, the greater my latitude, what Heart Math calls compassionate latitude, I was able to extend to others.
Yeah, and I think at any point, like you said, like who you used to be is the person in the past, but isn't necessarily who you are from this moment forward, right? Who you decide to be from this moment forward is the person
It's a
that you are.
choice.
It's a choice, and I think, and you can actually change it. Your previous context doesn't have to define your future. You can make that change, but you have to be aware, you have to be accountable, and you have to be very present in how you think about yourself, and you have to love yourself. I think that that's a key thing that I've definitely figured out over the years. So um, I've really enjoyed chatting to you today. I think it's been a huge amount of information. My learning has been amazing. So from this, I think in terms of authors, people to follow, sort of what to do, and I think that the basic blueprint in terms of how to go forward has been amazing. So thank you very much for sharing with us today.
Thank you, Stephen. It's my pleasure. I feel so grateful and honored that you invited me today, and anything that I could have done to maybe add just one little snippet of value. I feel so grateful for all my teachers and mentors who have helped me get to where I am, and that's why I love to share in any opportunity I'm given.
Amazing. Thank you very much.
Cheers.